Okay, welcome back to another week of Podding with PT. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Patrick.
And we've been waiting on this one for a minute, but we got our good friend Andre Upshur. How you doing, Andre?
Doing good, doing good. A little early on a Saturday morning, but it's good to be here. It's good making time to see you all and have
I
a
was
chat.
like, we've been trying to plan this one for a minute, but schedules finally aligned.
Hmm.
So just a quick background on how I met Andre. So I used to work at a yoga studio, and this was one of the Sunday nights. It was a random time. I think it was like we were about to close. So two people walk in, and I saw it was another black guy. So I was like, perfect. I don't see very often in Orange County. So let me see what's
Yeah.
up with him. And so we got to talking, and I was like, oh yeah, I just moved here from New Jersey. So, oh no way, I'm from New York. And it was probably about like an hour and a half away that he ended up being from where I'm from. So then we got to chat, and I saw him, or I was at the gym like months later, and then he tapped me on my shoulder. He's like, hey, you used to work at the yoga studio, right? I was like, oh shit, no way. So then we met up for coffee, and he's like, is it cool if I bring my girlfriend? I was like, yeah, I don't care. I was just doing some work. And then just like instantly, it was like maybe 30 seconds of small talk. And it was just like the conversation just flowed. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just funny how it all kind of came together. Because I even when I saw you at the gym, I was like, he looks familiar. I'm not sure. But I was like, something was like, I need to say something because I feel like in some cases I just be like, just like slide out and not say anything. But I'm so glad I did because like, obviously the conversation we had that day we were getting coffee, man, it was phenomenal. The book recommendation and just some of the stuff that I learned from like the different things that I've read, yeah, definitely opened up my eyes. So I feel like, it was like it was some like divine connection. I feel like, it was supposed to happen. And I'm glad that I kind of stepped out of myself and was willing to kind of just come up and say hi and like, look at where we are now. Right. So it's amazing what you can do by taking the first step. So happy to be here. And I'm glad, we can just have this conversation together and just, enjoy each other's company. So.
Yeah, it's crazy how like things like that work. You just get that feeling, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna act on it.
Mm.
And whereas typically it could be something that's like out of your normal, but it just kind of works out for the best.
Yeah, shoot. Pull up on someone then. Yeah. Get nervous. Just go ahead. Just that
Just
divine.
send it. Yeah.
Use that as the line. So something I had a feeling inside myself to talk to you.
I know what Chris Brown said. Like,
God sent me here.
Chris Brown said his when he hops into someone's DMs, he's like, God sent me here.
That is pretty. I mean, it's pretty funny though. Like, I do think sometimes it's easy to kind of just talk to somebody. I feel most people are going to be receptive, if you just obviously approach them the right way. But I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like we put things in our head. Like I don't know what was like why there was even like an internal dialogue for me, right? It's just like it was a simple thing. But obviously, I think the part of it too is I didn't want to like come up to you and you be the wrong person. So I was like, I think that's him, this and that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of things going on, but yeah, I think a lot of times it's just like we stand in our own way sometime. And I know for me personally, I was just like, sometimes I can be more like reserved. And I'm like, it's not really a big deal, but hey, you really never know. That one connection could change everything. So sometimes you gotta step out.
I gotta say, of all people that I've seen in the gym too, I'm like, damn, I need to follow this man Andre because his stretching routine is crazy. First off, and then second, I'm like, this man's the most jacked person in the gym doing all these stretching routines. I'm like, shit, I'm sitting here with my warm up, still struggling, and this man is like full sweat, and he's already about to leave. So,
No,
oh, shit.
it's funny because that wasn't always the case. Like I feel like when I first started, like the fitness journey was more so like just lifting, and like when I first started was for sports, and naturally you want to lift weights, you want to get the girls, you want to get the muscles, this and that. So that was the original like plan. But then over the years, it's just interesting to see how it evolved. And like now, like stretching, yoga, flexibility, mobility has been a big thing for me recently. So yeah, I'm enjoying the journey. I gotta learn to pick up a few things from you as well because I see you doing the different like movement techniques and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm always trying to learn new things and add some stuff to my arsenal. So we'll have to chat a bit more about that for sure.
Yeah. So Andre, I kind of want to get started a little bit about how you got started. I would say pretty much. I guess we can start back in New York. And then what brought you out to California?
So I guess I don't. It depends on how far we want to take it back, but maybe I'll start with college. Maybe that's a good
Yeah.
point. So I went to school in New Jersey. So I know when we were chatting when we first met, I mentioned I went to Rutgers in New Brunswick. So yeah, I went to school there for industrial and systems engineering. Interesting enough, I actually started as electrical and computer engineering. That's what I went into school as. Like, always loved technology, was really interested in it. And I made like when I started getting into my major classes, I realized like, I remember going to one class and I looked around and I was just like, everyone here is on their computer, just like, typing away and doing stuff and just, I don't know how to describe it, but I just felt it wasn't that right vibe. I was just like, something doesn't like it doesn't fit. Something doesn't fit here. And then I remember having some conversations with my undergrad dean at the time, and just the way he kind of talked to people and like treated people, I was just like, yeah, I don't know if this is the right spot for me. And from there, I kind of made a shift over into industrial and systems engineering, because I, had some friends in that lane, and I learned a lot from them as far as industrial systems and engineering being like the combination between business and technology. So like it was nice because it was still engineering, but it was problem solving, but in a more like business technical kind of landscape. So that was cool. I learned a lot from that experience. I just remember on my senior design project, we had to like create a robot, an autonomous like robot that like could spray herbicide on weeds. So they could drive through a lawn, find a weed, and then spray herbicide on it to kill it. And but it wouldn't just spray it on the whole lawn. It was find a weed, an actual weed. You have to be able to identify it with like machine learning, and then spray herbicide on it. When I tell you this was like we had no idea what we were doing. Like it was me and three other people. We had no idea what we were doing. But I have to say that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, because I had to do that plus also like I think 4 or 5 other classes, like engineering classes, like at that time. So it was extremely challenging, but also probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Because I learned so much because I really knew nothing. So that was a big thing for me, and I think that kind of set the tempo for kind of like what was to come.
That's a
From
awesome.
there,
Oh wow.
what's
Sorry to
that?
interrupt, but like
Yeah.
No, no,
My face, I was like, how do you even figure out how to do that?
that was we had some good resources. We had people like around. Like the whole idea was like you're not supposed to know how to do it, and you're just supposed to try and figure it out. So essentially, it's a system, right? When you think of a robot, it's just a system of things coming together. So naturally, we have to think about, well, the robot has to be able to move, and like, so what should the wheels look like because it's going to be moving in grass? The grass could be wet, right? So it doesn't want to get stuck in muddy terrain or whatnot. Then you have to think about, okay, how are you going to actually spray the herbicide, right? And how are you going to let the robot know when to spray the herbicide? And then you have to figure out, okay, I need to take a picture of a weed and then be able to tell, is this a weed or is this just grass? And if so, then be able to spray it. So there's a lot of logic you have to figure out too. So there's a bunch of little pieces you have to put together. And then what we noticed is you can't just take a picture out with the sun. You need to have a controlled environment where you take the picture. So we need to create like a shield that need to block out any kind of outside light, and we just shined the light inside, and then you took the picture. So there's a bunch of little things we kind of learned along the way, but it's one of those things where like you don't know until you start moving, right? It's like until you take that step, until you start going down that path, it's like, oh, we didn't even think about this. We didn't know this was going to be an issue, or we didn't even think it was going to be a problem, right? So it's like, but that was just like when I tell you it was like an incredibly challenging situation just to be in. It was tough, but definitely learned a lot like in the process. And like some things you just won't learn unless you just like roll your sleeves up and get into it. So yeah, that
There
was
you
a
go.
cool
right. And think
project.
about
Yeah.
just translating that to life. It's like you really don't know
Yeah.
until you do it, until you think of like the different factors that are different variables that could be playing a role.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
interestingly enough, Pat and I had a similar experience. So for our interview to get into PT school, they ask you in the group just a random question. So it's like, this is the first week of PT school. Like 4 out of the 6 of you have class, and the roof just started leaking. What do you do? and pretty much there's no right answer, but they try to see like how you start to think and how you problem solve. And it makes me realize it was like that. If you can translate that to everyone in life, now say, all right, we have this problem, how do we come together to fix it? I was like, shit, that could help fix the world. But that's for another conversation. But it's just interesting how when you take a problem and you say, okay, let's think of all these different things, you really just got to get into it and understand how other people think in order to move forward with whatever the goal is.
It's really funny you mentioned that, because I've just been having like different conversations with, just with people, just kind of picking their brain. Because, obviously all the talk, and I don't want to get into all this craziness, but, like all this talk around like impending recession and all this stuff kind of going on. And like, the war, with Ukraine and Russia, and even like conflicts and tensions between US and China and things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff going on, right? One of the things that came up is, I mean, you've heard of like the idea of US and and China fighting for supremacy, and like the idea of like their economy potentially eclipsing ours in the coming years, et cetera, et cetera. And I had an interesting conversation around that with this, like, he's a local business owner here in California. And I was just picking his brain and asking the question. And what he said was really interesting, was one of the things that make America and like the US unique is the idea that we celebrate different thoughts and different perspectives, right? And that's also important. That's even more important for solving problems. So it's like, naturally, when we look at what makes the US and makes the country great, is like we welcome a lot of different perspectives. We welcome people in from different areas. Like, immigration has always been a big part of the idea of what America stands for, and people want to be here, right? So it's important that if people are coming here and want to be a part of what we're doing here and things like that, then we need to kind of celebrate different ideas, different opinions. That's what makes us uniquely us. And yeah, I think that's something, when go to your point of like solving a problem or thinking through something, you just have to be open. You have to be open to different ideas and different thoughts and things like that. Like, I'm realizing that that's always been, I guess, innate to me. I've always been, I think, a naturally open person. But when I was talking to him and he put it that way, I was like, oh, I never really saw that as like our superpower, something very unique about America when you compare other places. So it's something I think everyone could take away from it, is like, you can learn something from everybody. I think this is always something you can take away and learn from others. So
Yeah, I agree with that. Pat usually, and I'm probably not going to do this justice, but I think it was like, come to every conversation just being open, because if you go into a conversation knowing, it was like you're not going to learn anything. So if you go into it being open, it's like, what can this person give to me? It was like, I might be talking to someone who maybe mows the lawn, but they have extreme like knowledge on wealth, on how to run a business. So it was like, to the outside perspective, it might be someone who's just mowing the lawn, but it's like, to when you have the conversation, is they have a vast knowledge of maybe all this information that might be helpful to you.
100%, 100%. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm not derailing too much, going on a tangent, but I mean, maybe should I jump back into the
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
to
ahead.
okay, cool. But that was a good chat. I feel like we could do this all day. So but yeah, I mean, like I said, coming out of school, that was the biggest thing that like stood out to me, was how empowering that that experience was. I felt like, I had this feeling I could do anything. I don't know. It was a really weird kind of like empowerment that came from the struggle. And that, I guess, always played a tone in the rest of kind of my life moving forward. So from there, I actually moved to LA for a little bit. I was actually working at like this like robotics company, just as like doing like customer support there, and like working with some of the engineers, like learning a little bit. This was after school. So that was like a short stint. That company ended up getting acquired. It actually got acquired by iRobot. They do the little Roombas or whatnot. So it was pretty interesting. Like, I'm sure the guy made a lot of money off of that one, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, from there I moved to Savannah, Georgia, and I was in Savannah, Georgia. I was there for about 2 years, and while I worked there as a manufacturing engineer at a um, the company they made like private jets and whatnot. So it was a really cool experience, like being there and just kind of seeing some of the work that was being done there compared to where I was in California. But one of the biggest things that time Savannah, Georgia did for me was like honestly my best friend, and we ended up kind of creating a startup together, which was another thing that kind of built off of my experience in college, where we had an idea, and then we just started like saying like, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And just like we just slowly started going down the road one step at a time. And yeah, it was a really cool experience. Like we learned so much. Like once again, one of those things where you can't learn it in a book. It's like you just get out there and you just start doing stuff. And yeah, you just start getting connected with people. You start going different places. You start, hanging around certain people and learning different ideas. And it was a really cool experience. And I think that's what set up the springboard for me to then start moving into technology. And then I landed at uh, EMC at the time. Then they had a merger, and it was Dell EMC. So there I was a consultant. So that was back in New York. So I actually was in Savannah for 2 years, and I moved back to New York. Um, and that was an interesting time. Like, cool job, but I didn't feel like I was learning a whole lot. But at that time, I met my ex, who was in California because I was working on a project out here, and that's kind of what led me out here. I met my ex when I was working on a project. Um, it got to the point where the project I was on ended, so I was back on the East Coast, and I was like, am I going to just like let the relationship die, or am I gonna like take a shot on this, or whatever the case may be? So I was really up in the air. I wasn't sure if I was gonna make a move, or because it sounds crazy to move across the country, for a relationship, right? So I'm just like, am I gonna like, risk it all and kind of just like go out there? And it's never really risky at all, right? It's not ever that serious, but I think we just naturally build things up in our head. But honestly, I prayed about it. I spoke to my parents and like just got their blessing and like making sure like just a sanity check. Like I'm not crazy about this, right? And I made that move, and honestly, that move was like a big shift, right? Like moving out here. That relationship didn't work out, but you both met my girlfriend now, and like fantastic relationship. That wouldn't have been possible if I didn't make that move. I have a fantastic job now that just like worked out beautifully, and like, I don't know, you can't beat Southern California. It's a beautiful place to
Hey.
live. So
I
so a lot of things just came together, but just a matter of taking that first step once again. So
yeah, and I think it's like great to hear because it sounds like you've been on the move, and so just like allowing yourself to be open to like where life takes you. It's like, all right, there's an opportunity here. Let me go here. Let me see what it's about, and just like open yourself up to like that vulnerability of like the unknown, or like what does this particular situation entail, and not knowing where it could take you, but then just still going after it. That's like you have to commend it because like not that's pretty scary just to allow yourself just be in a space and unsure if it will even work out. Like it could uh, work out badly, and you could be on the emotionally like distraught from the other side of it. So
I think it's interesting. Go ahead, Andre.
you got to tell.
I just think it's interesting how like human nature, our initial thought is, well, what if it doesn't work out? It was like, why not? Well, what if
Yeah,
it is the best situation that it could have ever been? It was like, why is that not our initial thought? And I think in my head,
yeah,
I've always played that. It was like, I've gotten to this higher up place. What if I'm not smart enough? Or what if they're gonna know that I don't
hmm
know this information? Where it's instead of celebrating myself, like, damn, I got myself here. I know I'm on the same level as these people and I can make my own self or make my own path. So it's interesting how we automatically go to the negatives and say, ooh, I got to this position. What if it's not everything I thought it would be? What if I'm not good enough when I'm here? Instead of giving ourselves that positive affirmation to say, I made myself here. This opportunity wouldn't be here if I didn't create it myself.
yeah. I mean, you're 100% right. Like, to both points, right? Like the idea of uncertainty, and it's funny, like, Pat, what you were saying as far as until I sat down and just spoke about the journey, I kind of forget about that uncertainty piece, right? Like I didn't realize, um, I guess, how well I thrived in ambiguity where things weren't super clear and I just kind of had to forge a path. When you look back, it's like, okay, things weren't always clear, and you do have to just take that step. And I've done that job, right? Where I've been able to put myself out there. And I think, Tyler, going to your point, it is, I think when you look back on your past and you can kind of learn from your like lessons that you've been through, it's like, yeah, I have done things over the past and I have made these steps and I have like, invested myself and done things I need to do. So it's not even about being like, oh, I deserve this or this and that. It's just like I'm able to like I'm more powerful or I have more in me than I realize, right? And I think naturally we're our own worst critic. Like I mentioned to you guys, like one of the big things, it's actually a thing, right? It's called like imposter syndrome. Like I'm sure you guys have heard the term, and it's actually a really big thing. So right now, like I'm working at Google, and so I work at Google Cloud as a solutions consultant. And when I first started 4 years ago, yeah, when you talk about imposter syndrome, like it was real. Like you get in there and you're just like, and they acknowledge it. That's a big thing as part of the culture. They acknowledge that a lot of people feel that way. And yeah, that was a huge thing for me. I was just like, am I smart enough to be here? Do I really understand stuff? Because naturally, when I got there, I felt like I didn't know a whole lot. So I was naturally very quiet and reserved. And like to the point where even my manager mentioned it, he was just like, hey, feel free to kind of say something, this and that, blah, blah. And it was interesting because I really did feel like I had to like find my voice, where I felt like I would see something, and if it wasn't right, like I would just have to say something. And I feel like I'm still going down that path where for a lot of us, we see things maybe around our environment, in our relationships and things like that, and it's very easy to just be quiet or like not say anything. But I think it's so important to really, there's big actions you can take to like move across the country. That's one thing, but sometimes just speaking up for yourself, speaking up for things you believe in, that's huge too. Just having like a voice and standing up for something, like it could start there. It could seem small, and I know a lot of times we'll like belittle it and be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it is. Like I think a lot of it starts there, and it's those small steps. It doesn't have to be a massive step, right? You just have to kind of build that muscle over time, right? It's just a little exercise here and there goes a long way. So
Right. I recently read the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and that's what something that they spoke of, and just like imposter syndrome, and how a lot of it could be um, that short. Making a long story short, it's like a form of social anxiety. It's like, all right, I'm in this place now. I'm gonna say something, and they're gonna realize like I'm not supposed to be here, or like, oh, I'm not on the same level as them, or like it's that late way of thinking. It's like, well, if I ask these questions or if I do these things, they're gonna be like, okay, you somehow are not belong. So it's like you don't fit in part of the circle. But I think it's like important to realize like you're in this position for a reason. Like you're in this place for a reason. Um, Allowing yourself, like, yeah, you did the work to be here. And then you don't realize the power or the impact that you have into a room. And it's like you focus on the negatives. I was like, what if, but you don't see like, well, what I bring to the table could be what they're missing. And so just keeping that in mind, because like,
exactly.
right. So it's like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and that's like something that me and Tyler like tell each other, like, yo, like we're right where we're supposed to be. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep pushing. It's like we're that kind of like a mantra, just like, all right, we can do this. Like we're here. We're showing up every day. Like we're doing the thing.
I've looked at it in a couple of different ways now, just off of different like books. You ever read the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck? So to the point that I also helped me is like when you get over yourself and realize, yes, you're important, but you're not that important. There's like, for the most part, if you say something, they're not listening, like, or they're not replaying in their head, like, oh, this guy's a dumbass. It was like, you probably said what you said. They probably appreciated it and then just kept it pushing like the rest of their day. It wasn't like 2 hours later where you're like, damn, I wonder if they're still thinking about it. It's like they have a million other things in their life that they're doing.
True. You know, there is, I remember there was so I was working on a project, and So how it's set up is we work with like we have like I'm on like the sales side, so there'll be an account team, and they'll own a book of business, so they'll own like the customer relationships, right? And my job is to kind of come in and help with the selling motion, things like that. So I remember, you know, putting together like this action plan or this idea of how we could potentially, go move forward with this customer. And like I presented to the field sales rep, and when I shared it with him, it just seemed kind of like it was like blown off, or um he almost felt like maybe I was like stepping on his toes or things like that. Like that's how it came off to me, right? Like I presented this thing, I thought I put a lot of work into it. I was like, oh, I have this idea, this and that. And I was kind of like, that's good, that's great. And we kind of moved on. So it was funny because that thing kind of sat with me because I felt like from then on, like, all our conversations were kind of like there was like a some kind of like tension or something going on. I felt that, and I was just like, oh, I don't know. And even my manager, she was like aware too, and she felt it a little bit too. So, I was like, okay, I don't want to keep doing this, right? Like, I'm here to help. I want to serve and like, do what's right by the customer, and like, that's the most important thing. And I need to like take the back seat and just follow the lead from the field sales rep because it's his account. So I created a meeting and I sat down and chatted with him, and I kind of said like, hey, I wanted to apologize for this, that, and the other. And he was just like, uh, okay, like, I didn't feel that way, but if that's how you feel, I appreciate you kind of bringing it up and saying that. But then from there, like we were able to just have a conversation and just chat through things. And, I then kind of like humbled myself and was like, well, how can I help this, that, and the other? And he called out a few things. And then that led to a different path in the relationship and just how we were kind of working through things. But it's just funny to your point, like, it's not we think we're gonna say something wrong, or like we're going to, make ourselves like look like a fool, like the jig is up, like we're found out, like they
No.
figured us out, right? Um, but honestly, it's like people aren't really even paying attention, right? Like they have their own things that they're dealing with, and things that come up in their life. But I do think sometimes if you do feel something is a little like in that particular case, even though I felt something was off and it really wasn't all that big for that person, I think just addressing the thoughts that I had and like just confronting them, because it would be easy to kind of sweep it under the rug and just move on. Me talking to him and just having that one-on-one, it was actually really good because then it led to us just having honest conversation. I'm like, hey, how can I help? Like, what can I do? And he really appreciated that. And I thought that was a really cool like shift. So it's like you can learn something. There's always something when something like stands out to you, you got to kind of trust that feeling and just say like, what is this? Can I explore it a little bit more and just dig into it a little bit? So
Right. And that's something that I start to practice now. Anytime I have like a negative thought like that, I was like, what if it goes wrong? I'll automatically go, what if it goes right? And so
yeah.
I'm taking it, all right. So not only looking at one side of it, and let's look at both sides, look at the spectrum. And so that way I was like, all right, what's the worst that can happen? And whereas what's the benefit that could come from it? And so just that honestly helps me day to day now. Just like, all right, just do it.
Mhm.
It leads to less of that. Well, I'm that worry and that anxiety of like, all right, this, and this. So
We had a friend who's a cognitive behavioral therapist on, and she said when any of her kids start talking negative to themselves, she always says, okay, so what evidence do you have to prove that you are not good enough, or prove that you're ugly, or prove that you're unhealthy? So it's like then when you actually sit with that question, like what evidence do you have to prove, then it's like, oh, I really have to think about this. Like, do I actually have those facts to say I'm not good enough to be in this position? Or do I have the facts to say, oh, I am good enough to be in this position? So that's one that I've kind of taken forward and been like, okay, what do I have to prove that I'm not good enough at this point? And it's like, usually it's the other side of the coin where you have things to say, I'm good enough because I do this, this, and this. I know I've done this in the past. I have facts to back that part up. So I think that's another question for me, for myself, that I always ask.
Yeah, and I would love to get both of your thoughts on this. So a big thing for me, and I noticed, like just having a routine, like a certain set to my day and certain things that I do to kind of get my mind right in the beginning of my day. Like Tyler, you see me at the gym, stuff like that. Like that's a big time for me where like I kind of have that like meditation point where I have my music going, right? And I'm just like going through my workout. And I feel like that also sets my energy, sets my tempo for the day. And you know, when I train, like I go very hard. Like I just like that, like all gas, no break. And typically I'm like all gas, and then like towards the end when I do the stretching, that's like my break, like slowing down and stuff like that and preparing for the day. But things like that, even like listening to different videos or different people that like I really admire. Like I think we were talking about like I like to listen to Jordan Peterson.
Mm.
I also listen to so Transformation Church. They're online. Their Pastor Michael Todd, phenomenal lessons. So a lot of times in the morning, I listen to these things and they kind of just get my mind right. And like I have like a little routine in my morning. I kind of like to start things off to just like make sure I'm bringing the right energy to work and the people around me. So I'm curious, like for you guys, is there things that you feel kind of help you stay in that mindset or get to that mindset to like go into your day or to like, just feel that strength and go into your day with like some kind of power and like, like, hey, I'm gonna have a good day today. Like you just
Mm.
have that feeling. But anything that comes to mind?
Pat?
Um, so I recently started like I don't bring my phone into my room when I go to bed. And so when I wake up, it's like I kind of just sit up like slowly, just because like instantly if I have my phone, like I grab my phone and now I'm like on social media. Now I'm constantly thinking
Yep.
about other things other than like how I'm feeling. How do I want to go about this like today? But usually wake up, go for a walk, just probably about a mile or so, just something quick, and then get ready, go to the gym, and then so I'm at if and then from there is I work at I start work at noon. So I have like pretty much my morning just to kind of like reset and just like kind of figure out how I'm feeling. But even before I go to work, so after the gym, I do a meditation. The Calm app has been really helpful for me just to be like, all right, like a guided meditation, just something set 10 minutes or so. And then from there, I kind of just go on with my day. So it's like I've been trying to stay in that routine. The gym part has been the biggest variable because sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
Especially for me, it's like the gym is not a um, escape for most because like if I'm in the gym, if I'm working out, I'm constantly thinking about what I got to do. Like how quickly do I need to be out of here in order to get to work or do the
Yeah.
things I need to do. So it's like I have to be in a place of real like comfort with myself to be in the gym. So that's why I rely on at least getting the walk in because that's my constant. Like I wake up, I go for a walk, and during my walk, either I'm listening to music, but mostly just taking in the environment, just like realizing, just being present of where I am, and then everything else that come after that is like, all right, now you can do it. So
I
really,
like
it's
that.
that waking up without my phone, then going on the walk is how I like come to myself and figure out how I'm feeling, figure out where I am at today, and then everything else just kind of falls into place after that.
Nice. Also, ask so Pat starts work at noon. Keep that in mind. Ask him what time he wakes up.
Yep. Um, Typically I wake up between 5 and 5:30 in the morning, and so
And that it doesn't work till he has a whole day, a whole ass day before you even start your day.
yeah, and so I
You're nice.
work noon to 7, and so I'm typically up at like 5:30, and then at the gym at 7. But even still, and then like I finish up, and I'd probably go to the coffee shop and trying to catch up on some things before I go to work. But and
It's
so
actually pretty
even
nice.
so even at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm just like in my workout. I was like, all right, what are some things I need to do? I'm rushing my workout. And like, I got like 4 hours before I need to be anywhere. But it's like still in my mind, like, all right, I have things to do. So I was like, I need that time just to
Wow. That's actually a pretty decent schedule right there. It's nice
Right?
being able to wake up and have that like time to like kind of get your thoughts together, get some things done, and then get into the work. That's really nice.
So I got 7 hours before you start work. I'm just doing anything.
And so now, like when I get off of work at 7, I'm in bed by 10. Like, hey, I'm out. I'm done. I had a long day.
10 is pushing it at this point. For some of the stuff for me, I feel like when I wake up, very similar to you, I was reading this article. I have to find it again about how even the presence of a cell phone lowers your brain waves just because of kind of stuff you talk about of what am I doing on social media, what emails do I have to respond to, what's my bank account looking like, what are my friends doing. So the presence of a phone decreases your brain waves, especially when you're first waking up. You kind of want to obviously be in better brain waves. So for me, it's drink some water the minute I wake up. I have a rule that I don't look at my phone until 8, at least on weekdays. So if I wake up at 6, then I don't look at my phone to like text anyone, look at Instagram, anything until 8 o'clock, which is about the time that I'm leaving the gym. So I wake up, drink some water, write down in like my journal, like what I'm thankful for that day or how I want the day to go or what I plan on doing that day. And I always try to keep those things in my head. So if it's like, I want to be able to, if I'm learning something new, I'm going to try this exact technique on every single person, no matter what it is, and then see what I can get from there at the end of the day and just kind of reflect on that. So that's how I start my days. And then usually most days it's at the gym just because it's nice to be around other people. It's a time for myself, just kind of as like a moving meditation where I do like the sedentary one. But for me, a lot of it is if I can get my body moving and even just feel like I got, this was a really nice stretch that I felt today, or like I felt like I PR'd in one of my like a bench press, something like that. It's just like little goals that I can have throughout the day that I like. And then so by the time I get out of that, come home, and I'm usually the one rushing to get to work because I'll come home by like 8, bullshit for a little bit, and now I got to shower and I got to leave, and I end up catching every damn light. So that's my morning's a little more rushed than Pat's, and to my own fault. And then just throughout work, I try to think of what I'm thinking, because people are telling me a lot of information. A lot of times that especially when I first started treating, I had a disconnect of, you're telling me this information, I have read about this, I've learned about this is the exercise that you have to do. And if it didn't work, I'm like, well, what's wrong with you? Or like, why didn't it not work for you? And then it took me like months to realize like, oh, maybe it's the way I'm delivering it or the way that I'm thinking about the person, or maybe I only heard one part and that all of a sudden shut everything out. And now I'm thinking, or I'm hyper focused on that one thing that's your problem. So for me, it's had to take like months and months of practice of sitting down and saying, okay, what else did they tell me? Or what could I have said differently? That might've been the world of difference, even in just like a simple cue. So they talk about like internal versus external cueing. And I'm like, giving someone an external cue of me tapping or me saying, hey, use this muscle or do something like this, push through the floor, doesn't register for everyone. So I've had to take a step back and realize not everyone is cookie cutter and not everyone needs the one thing. So even when I go to work out, I start to think of, okay, what's something that I feel that might be the missing link for somebody, or what's something I focus on an external cue that might help somebody like later on in the day. So I use the gym for myself in terms of like a moving meditation, but then it also helps my work. So that's kind of how my routines go.
It's also just kind of hearing, I'm picking up on a little bit of things from both of your routines, like the phone, the impact the phone can have, like when you get into it too early. Like that's something I have a challenge with. Sometimes it's natural for me to like grab my phone and to just like look at it. I was actually listening to what's it, Andrew Huberman. So like I've been listening to some of his podcasts, and I remember one of them he was talking around the importance of like light in the morning and what it does to kind of set your circadian rhythm. So I do feel like when I look at the phone, it does kind of wake me up, right? The light from the phone, like I look at the phone sometimes as a way to just kind of like a wake up or a pick me up, like in the morning. I don't think it's so much think it's like dopamine from like looking at messages or anything like that, but just the light from the phone kind of makes me feel awake. And the idea behind is like we are used to kind of getting light from outside, and that's supposed to kind of help to kind of set our circadian rhythm and make us feel. It gives us like a cortisol rush, which like wakes us up and kind of gets us ready for the day, and it kind of sets our clock right for the day, so that way for 12 to 14 hours later you'll be tired, right? So, but naturally, like Pat, what you were talking about going for a walk, that's actually even better way to kind of set that circadian rhythm is like getting outside. And they say like when the sun is at a low point, like when it's rising, like being out and walking near that time is like one of the best things you can do to kind of like set your pace for the day. And it's obviously sunlight overall is just good for you as well. So it's funny you both mentioned that. Like I feel like putting the phone away, potentially maybe getting out for a walk even before the gym, that would be really cool. So I'd love to see if I can fit that in, or even just like doing more of like a walk and like a bit of a meditation. Because I notice I'm more of a I don't mind like sitting down and like just meditating, but I definitely feel like I'm more of an active meditation kind of person. Like I do feel like I connect more when I'm like moving or things like that. One of my challenges that I need to work through is like being present, like slowing down, taking a moment, right, and pausing. And that's something I do need to definitely work on. So that's something I try to kind of incorporate too, in my mornings. Like one thing I've been like recently trying to do more is I notice like when I like pray in the mornings, I can just feel a bit better about my day. So like I'll try and take, it's so easy to kind of get going and start moving throughout the day. Sometimes I'll like be driving to work and I'll be like, oh, I'll just pray while I'm driving to work. But just actually sitting down and taking a time to just kind of do that like little meditation, yeah, helps tremendously, right? So it's like little things like that just get your mind right. And it does kind of help you understand, tell you into your point, the fact that you're asking the questions of like, why isn't my, patient getting this or whatever case may be, like trying to kind of meet them where they are, like that's a huge step, right? A lot of people don't care, right? Like a lot of people don't take that time and they're so focused in their own world, right? Where they're just like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. They're not even thinking about this patient or this customer. They're thinking about the next one. Or they're thinking about like, oh, well, how much longer till I get out of here, and I got to do this today, this, that, and the other. And so, it's nice, hearing like the how important the work is to you and like how important that person is to you, right? Because you want them to get it, you want them to feel better, you want them to, get the treatment they deserve. So I think even that perspective and like coming into work with that mindset, like that's a huge thing. That's a huge win. And a lot of people don't, just don't have that, right? So
Right. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Andre, I would wonder what like your interactions at work are like. Because for me, is I have typically patient after patient, and then, like I have to be able to switch gears and then like be present for the next one. So I always, even if I'm like behind, I take a deep breath, and then like go meet the patient and go to like the treatment table. And um, before they start telling me like their progress that they made, I'm just like want to make sure I take a deep breath and I'm cool, calm, and collected because I don't want to give off my energy to like if I'm feeling rushed or like I
yeah,
don't want
yeah.
them to feel rushed. I want them to be able to express however they feeling, however they want to feel it. Um, and so like I have that like just mental cue. All right, take a second to be present. As like, do you have those type of moments, or like how are your interactions when you're at work?
It's interesting. Like with work, it's things change so like each day looks very different because mostly my job is focused on working with our customers. So you might be working with this business here, that business here, and it'll be in different industries, so have different challenges, things like that. And even working with different people internally, they have different roles. So understanding their role, what their responsibilities are, and how I'm supposed to work with them to accomplish our goal, this, that, and the other. There's a lot of different things that like factors that come into play. Um, so for me, when one of the perspectives that really helped me and helped me be present is, and I feel like it naturally speaks to the like what I'm called to do, my purpose is I love problem solving. Like that's one of the big things I enjoy doing, right? I love being able to kind of look at a challenge, look at a problem, break it down and solve that. So one of the things that really helps me before I go into a conversation is like, how can I serve? Right. That's one of my big um, thought process that I try to kind of bring into everything I do. Like when I meet somebody, I want to listen to them, like actually listen to what they have to say and say, how can I add to this person? How can I make the situation any better? Right. And I think that where I kind of remove myself from it, or try my best to kind of remove myself and like what I might be thinking of, what else might be going on, it allows me to kind of just be present and just kind of hear what they're saying and say, okay, just take it in and then ask questions back, right? Like, okay, you said this, this, and this. So I'm trying to like dig into a little bit more and get to maybe the root or somewhere where I could potentially add some value or help out or things like that. I think that's one of the big things that's been really a big factor for me, even more so recently, is just kind of sitting down, listening, asking questions, like just being present with that person. I mean, for me, I feel like I'm most present when I'm asking questions, when I'm like listening in that sense. So that's, I think, my cue is if I'm not asking questions, if I'm not like, you know, going back and forth and keeping things entertaining, or maybe even throwing a little joke in there, stuff like that. It's like then I feel like I'm slipping and I'm thinking about like, oh, what am I going to do here and do this later, blah, 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 this and that. I think it's really important to think about how do you make the other person feel that you're talking to, because you can make them feel important, you can make them feel like you're happy to be there, or you can make them feel like you're kind of wasting my time, I need to go do this and this and that, and like you could tell when someone's disconnected, you can read it on their face. And if you think you're smart enough to fool somebody, right, like you're only really fooling yourself. So I think
Yep.
that's the thing that I try to keep myself in check with. So
Active listening is very important, and I'm really grateful for like the type of work that we do. Is you get so many different people with so many different personalities that need so many different things and have had like a vast just like history of like that are different. So um for me in general, it's helped me deal or like learn to talk to people or learn how to pretty much make someone feel comfortable. So it's like make them feel important. So every single person that I get, if I see 15 people in a day, that's 15 different personalities. And within that same session, they probably have 2 or 3 different personalities that they're sharing within that. So it's like they'll have some frustration, they'll have some moments of hope, and you have to learn and kind of pick up and read, okay, what can I say to you at this point that's going to help get you further? And I think that's really important dealing then with people and then just relationships that you have outside of work and just like whether it's romantic, whether it's friendships. And Pat and I've been doing a lot of just reading in general on like how to understand people, how to talk to people. And it's great because we get right away. It was like, I have no choice but to implement these things. Like if I learn it on Sunday, I have to do it Monday through Friday at a high level to make sure that you feel comfortable with me, I feel comfortable with you, and we're both kind of progressing towards what the end goal is.
Right. Yeah. It could be tough in a way that, well, for myself, just like my natural demeanor is just like, all right, let me change your mood, like let me bring you up, but also now just like realizing um let how important it is for you to feel how you feel and to be in that moment, and then just me to be there as support. So now like even as a physical therapist, I was like, look, if you're feeling sad, I was like, damn, that's fucked up. Like, but to a sense, like, all right, like this is where you're at. And I like, yo, you can feel this way. And then like they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm being such a downer. I was like, look, you're not changing my energy right now. Like I'm here for you. Like if you want to feel this way, all right, but just know like this is not the end right here. It's like, all right, we're gonna make some steps if like to go to the next level. So I mean, yes, you can feel this way. You like sit in this moment, like, but also recognize the other side of it. Recognize the small wins. Like those small wins are big wins in a sense. Like they're improvements. Like you're seeing change, and it's okay to feel one way, but also recognize the other. I don't want you don't have to be happy, but like you do have to have some awareness to on the other side.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about just in certain situations is uh seeing, like, knowing that you feel nervous about something or cautious about a new situation is like, yeah, you should be cautious about that. Take that into account, but then also move forward and say, I'm putting myself in this vulnerable position. I'm going to feel certain ways, but how can I then progress forward to make sure that I'm getting the most out of whatever situation it is?
It's just kind of hearing you all, like, one of the things that kind of stood out to me, and I'm just curious to get your perspective on this, is when you have like a new patient come in and someone you're working with, right? I guess what naturally, like, they have to believe, like, some people come in at different points and they have to believe in their recovery. They have to believe in, like, that they're worth recovery. Like, so I don't know if it's like a self-worth thing, I don't know if it's a thinking thing, a mindset thing, but there's usually something that you need to kind of impart to the person to make them feel like, hey, you're worth putting the time in, you're worth, like, doing what you need to do to kind of get this going. Because yes, they're going to see you for maybe an hour, 2 hours, whatever case may be, but eventually they're going to have to go home and they're going to be faced with the opportunity to kind of fall into bad habits or do things that potentially are going to exacerbate any kind of symptoms or issues they might be having. So I'm curious to kind of understand, like, how do you keep people accountable in that sense? One of the things I heard, and I wanted to kind of just like share this, is from Jordan Peterson. He talks about how, let's say a person owns a dog, right, or if they have a pet, and they go to the dog's not feeling good, and they take it to the vet, and the vet says, hey, this dog needs to take this vitamin 3 times a day and this, that, and the other for the next 2 weeks. Most people will go get the prescription, they'll give the dog the medicine on time, and they'll stay diligent about it, right? But if you do the same thing, if they were in the same case where they're like, hey, the doctor told them, hey, you're not doing well, maybe you have high blood pressure, you need to take this medicine, 3 times a day for the next 2 weeks, some people won't even go and get the prescription, right? So it's interesting how, like, when it comes to their dog or someone else, they feel like they're worthy of care, right? So they're worth putting the time and energy into. But a lot of times when it comes to ourselves, we're like, we slack off, right? We're like, I'll be all right, this and that. So it's just an interesting dynamic. So I'm just curious, like, how you all kind of confront that idea of people really investing in themselves and really feeling empowered to, like, seek out the treatment.
Mm. Go ahead, Pat.
It's definitely that same case that you speak of, because most people don't come seek help to a physical therapist until they cannot
Mm.
do a specific task. Like if they're a golfer, like, and I was like, they have pain where they golf, they don't seek help until they literally cannot golf. And so it's like they have to get to this threshold of like, oh, I cannot do something at all anymore. Um, but then it's like trying to, that first session, like creating that awareness of like, hey, this comes from a point of like, all right, I'm never going to be able to do something now. I just want to live without pain. Like, forget playing golf again. Like, I am just in so much pain. Like, please help. But just trying to get to a sense of um, that you're redeemable. Like, cause some people like really just feel like this is not going to help, but my doctor just sent me here. So now I'm like, all right, let's show you can do things that without pain. You can move, you can, start. If it's not golf, you can do other activities, but that comes later. But on day one, it's like, all right, what hurts, and let's see if we can make a direct change. So I'm thinking, all right, how can we um what is the movement fault? So what is your issue? Can we make a change today, very first session, to get you bought in to
Yeah, that's
this
huge.
program, to like, all right, what can we do to give you hope that you
Yeah.
can move
Mm.
better, you can move without pain, you can like actually change from where you're at. So it's like
Yeah,
that
that's
initial
huge.
day is just like, all right, trying to now and it comes to now, it's like I have to listen. And so yes, you may say that golf is like your major goal, but is it your priority? And so it's like I have to understand, like, yes, you say this one thing, but what is the most significant thing in your life that needs to change? Because there you may people might project it onto one specific activity, but it could be something else. So it's like just trying to get a sense of what they're saying and then what they're doing, what they're telling you, what's their background, and just trying to hit all the, I don't want to say a checklist, but you want to be pretty thorough and trying to get a gauge of how they're feeling.
Yeah, I like, I like what you said there, excuse me, with you were talking about like the hope, like that's extremely important. People have to believe there's some hope, right? Like a lot of people can be in like despair or just kind of, especially if they come to you and they're in such a, dire straits where they're like, man, I can't do anything, like this hurts, blah, blah, blah. It's like trying to give them that hope back. And I like how you were talking about like finding meaning, right? So not just the golf piece, but like what else, like your ability to move or do this, there's meaning in other areas of your life, right? Like maybe they have kids they want to be able to like interact with, or grandkids, right? Or like they also with their work, or other areas of their life, right, that are important to them, that this is also impacting, right? So there's a lot of benefits that they're going to get when they kind of go down that path. So yeah, that's really good. And then also belief, I think that was another thing you were kind of mentioning too, is like that belief and like showing that small win, right? Getting that small win, like how we were talking before, is like getting that first step and that result. And that's something, you could be like, hey, yeah, I did kind of do that and I did make progress and that did feel much better. And so it allows them to kind of build on that. So no, that's really good. I appreciate that perspective for sure. Tyler, anything you want to, I guess, add to that? Anything you're thinking?
No, the first visit is a lot. I have a lot of
Yeah.
things going on in my head. So in the way that when I treat someone, I want to make sure I know absolutely every single thing that has ever happened to you. Does people even tell me that? No, but it's like
Mm,
I try to even break down each body part. And I've found in a way it teaches me how to talk to people, because if I say, have you ever had any injuries to like say your ankle, and they'll be like, oh no, I've never
yeah.
had any injuries. And then if I reframe the question and say, have you ever had any fractures or surgeries to any of that, like say that ankle, then they'll go, oh yeah, well one time I had this thing. And even though for me it's like I know now that I have to approach them in a different way to make sure that they understand what I'm trying to ask. So it's like my delivery, it teaches me, okay, sometimes you may need to ask the same question, but use different words for different people. So then for me, that's where I have to take the mindset and say, okay, that's kind of how I need to communicate with this person. Also, on the first one, I always try to remember at least one fact or one thing that they tell me that they like to do. So that way I can
Mm,
bring it up again and make sure that they know that I was listening. Because I've had
yeah.
experiences with doctors and people have told me a lot of the times where it's like, shit, I was with the nurse for however long. Doctor came in 2 minutes, did this, this, and this, and then he was done. He or she was done. And so for me, I want to make sure that someone knows that I'm listening and I'm here and we're going to build a relationship together, because you got no choice but to work with me for the next couple of weeks at this point. So I always try to make sure I pick up on something that means something to them. The first couple sessions is more movement based for me, where I tell them or try to figure out if I can make a change, kind of what Pat was talking about. And then after we start to see some change, then I want to educate them on why movement is so important. Like, yes, it makes your body feel better, but it does a world of good for the brain. It does a lot for pretty much your overall threat levels and how you move through life. And I was taking a course, interestingly enough, where they break down how people walk, and that's how I pretty much watch and kind of get where things might be a problem just based off how someone walks. And if you look at someone who walks very stiff through the world, so if they're very tight as a human being, you look at their hips don't move well. They kind of equate it and say, do you realize how much fear that person is walking through in the world? So for them, they might be walking extra tight because they have no idea what's coming up. So they're always on like a guard. So that teaches you then how to talk to people and make sure that, ooh, okay, maybe I can't approach this and saying, damn, you have really stiff hips. So it's like they might be more
Mm,
sensitive and need something else to be receptive to. So
mm,
it's just taking in the whole picture of seeing how do you move, how do you understand the questions that I'm asking, what are your experiences like from past medical providers. And then one of our teachers gave us a pretty good tip. He told us, if someone has been through physical therapy before, ask them what other people did. So it was like, don't do the exact same things if it didn't work. Ask them like, okay, did you do this and did it work? And it was like, so for me, I've kind of taken that. So stand on somebody else's shoulders that might have failed beforehand. And that's how I move forward with people.
Yeah, and I think listening to you, the biggest role that I feel like I play is I'm just here to support you. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, if you want to get back to moving, like I am here to support you. And that's what it is. Like some days, first session, there's somebody's in so much pain. I'm literally like, I just have my hand on them, and I was like, all right, take some deep breaths, and so like, just like let them know like I'm here and I'm present with you. Um, and then sometimes like that just helps them decrease the pain because they're so on guard and they're so tensed up because of whatever they're going through. Or and another point is, um, there's one of my patients. She fractured her shoulder, and she was saying she only wears this one V-neck shirt because that's the only T-shirt she can put on because there's so much pain. And then just like yesterday, like she had a different shirt on, and so just like bringing that up. Oh,
Damn.
you remember when you only wear your black V-neck? Look, you have a nice pink shirt on. Happy Friday. You know what I'm saying? I was like, that's crazy. And just like,
Yeah.
even that moment, just like, oh, hey, I remember you said this, but look, you're wearing different shirts now. Like even that. And so that level of support.
Very psychological in what we do. Go ahead, Andre.
No, no, I just want to like just the what you were saying, Tyler, and then Pat, you even mentioned about it too, was so you're talking about how like someone even walks through the world, like you can tell like if they have fear, like what they're carrying and things like that. Like that's actually really interesting, like you mentioned that, because what I noticed, and the reason why I love like stretching, what really kind of helps me like meditate when I stretch is, so I've done like yin yoga in the past where it's a bit more of like, you hold the position for like 3 to 5 minutes, right? And you just kind of really sink into it. And it's interesting how when you start like stretching, like things will be really tight, right? What they tell you to do is kind of breathe into it and just kind of slowly let your body like you sink into that position, right? It's almost like, yes, there's pain or a little bit of discomfort, but you like kind of breathe through it, and you just have to kind of relax and like just like allow your body to like trust your body, right? Like you're not gonna break anything, you're not gonna rip anything, right? Just like slowly ease yourself into it. And I think, yeah, a lot of that does come like there's like metaphors with life, right? Where it's just like sometimes you have to breathe through things and just like go through it, right? Like, we started kind of talking around like the uncertainty and the unknown and being fearful and being pessimistic. And I think it's so important to sometimes really just like kind of just breathe, just take it easy, be present, like just be in the moment. Because when your head starts moving to the future, moving to the past, right, like that's where you start getting the doubts and getting the fear. But if you're just like present, you just kind of take it step by step, right, like just how powerful that is, right? And I'm sure that's even extremely important for your patients, right? Like it's very easy for them to like, wanting to already be down the road and be like recovered, right? Or maybe they have trauma from the past or what kind of led to this point, but it's like important trying to pull them to be present, right? And to like be able to like just appreciate this moment and the journey, right? Appreciate the process, appreciate the journey, right? They're gonna learn a lot about themselves in the process, right? As they're kind of going through it. So that was really really insightful. That was a good little tidbit right there. So I appreciate that.
So one of the things that interesting that you kind of brought up, the stretching and pain or a bit of uncertainty, is it's all related. So I really like the way someone described pain. For me, they said it's pain is not necessarily an input, it's more of an output. So when you think of it in a way of someone thinks like, oh, my muscle's ripping or my muscle's stretching or I'm going to break something. Like, first off, like, you're not that strong to do that. But second off, I was like, that's more of your body doesn't feel comfortable in whatever position it's in for whatever reason it may be. So it's sending you an output to get you out of there. And a way that they kind of describe it is if you think of people that get seasick. So it's what's called sensory mismatch. So if my visual system is telling me that I'm not moving at all because I'm maybe reading like a book or looking at my phone, but my vestibular system is telling me I'm moving. So then it's like my brain is not sure because it's not getting accurate information. So it will lead to an output like people who get seasick and throw up because they're automatically going to go away from whatever it is that they were doing. Or if they tell you to look at the horizon, it then tries to balance out those two systems. So for me, that's when I try to describe to people, hey, yes, I understand. And your pain is very real. It's in your brain. but it's trying to tell you of something that you're doing, it wants you to change. So yes, your pain is very real, but on the same hand, knowing that there's a lot of things that go into this bucket that are now leading to your pain. So whether it's your social life, whether it's your alcohol intake, whether it's your scars on your arm that are not getting appropriate feedback in, that are now leading to your brain not being as certain as where it is in space. So it's a lot of those different things. So making sure everyone knows, like, you need to be a well-rounded human being in order to have the best life that you can. So whether it's having that stretching moment, whether it's noticing those little wins in life, so it's like you're on a better path or better mindset. So that way, those types of things are what help decrease the pain, because you're giving better input, or you're taking out the overflowing of input that is now leading to the output.
Mm, I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's it's definitely, yeah, it's funny how you mentioned that, like with pain, like it is your body kind of like communicating with you, right? And that's something that I feel like it's important to kind of listen to. And when I first started kind of working out and stuff like that, it is very easy. And I know like as a man too, like, you know, being masculine, right? You're like, oh, you feel pain. It's like, oh, you just keep going through it, right? Like it's like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, oh, my knees hurt today. Oh, you know, just like stretch a little bit and you'll be good. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I realize, you know, it's just an indicator, right? Like if you're feeling pain or feeling some discomfort in a certain area, right? Like you do kind of have to explore a little bit. It doesn't tell you to mean run away, right? When I think a lot of times we are natural to just be like, oh, that hurt. I'm not doing that ever again, right? But like for me, like lifting, and I think a lot of people who lift like weights, and they'll notice like little pains. Sometimes they'll get pains in their joints, whatever case may be, right? So like paying attention to that and being like, well, what can I do to kind of help this particular thing, right? Like sometimes you might feel pain in your knee, but maybe it's because maybe you have like tight quads or tight hamstrings or like your glutes or something. Like it's all like connected, and it's like interesting going down that journey of kind of learning and digging into it a little bit more. Um, and it kind of ties back into this other thing that I heard, this like saying. It's like your pain is your purpose, right? So it's like when you're able to kind of go through something tough and like go through something challenging or like experience some kind of pain and then go through it and not run away, right? Because the easy thing to do is to run away from it, right? But if you actually start asking questions or around that pain, saying like, well, why does this, I notice when I do this, this happens, you know, why is that, right? Or like digging into it a little bit, right? Obviously being careful because you don't want to hurt yourself or like make things worse, but like being able to go through that and then coming out of the other side, you know, better, more whole, et cetera, et cetera. Like now you have a story, right? You have something that you can actually share with others, because chances are you're not the only one who's felt that pain or has been there, like in that spot, right? So it's like you actually have something now to be able to pass on. And I think that is very empowering, right? Like it gives you that purpose. It gives you something to kind of pass on and go through and whatnot. So
Talk
yeah,
that
that's
talk.
really interesting to
All
me.
right. All right. Woo.
It's true. One thing that I really hope that a lot of people at least get from some of the stuff that we've been talking about too is pain is an indicator that something's wrong. It's just not an
Mm,
indicator of where that thing is wrong. So it's like my knee may be bothering me, but it doesn't always mean it's your knee. It might be the way you move. It might be the way that you breathe. It might be a lot of different things. So you have to explore it. So journaling is very, very big. No, be very intentional with it. And we talk about it a lot. Be intentional with what you're doing, because if you're just putting a lot of fluff in your life, you have no idea where that could be
yeah.
going haywire. So if you're more intentional with it, it's like I know what I'm doing when I'm doing it, and it doesn't have to be precise, but it's like I have a method to my madness, and if there's something that's not working for my body, I know that I can narrow it down to more precise.
Right. You're able to identify what works best for you and then what doesn't serve you. And so now you can make those changes and do more things that serve you if you're
Mm.
just intentional, if you know what happens.
Yeah, and I'm a bit of a bully when it comes to people telling me about their pain. They're like, my shoulder just hurts. I was like, when does it hurt? I don't know, when I do this motion, but I sometimes it's like that, sometimes it's not. I was like, okay, so when is it like that? And I'm like, I hammer every single thing. What exactly does it feel like? Does it feel better if you turn your arm in and do this? Does it feel worse? And it really highlights how variable pain can be. And I even like can show them, I was like, I can't help you if you only tell me that it's painful. Because also what's painful to you is not painful to someone else. Like, and I deal with so many people, so I need to know exactly what your pain is. So that makes,
Yeah.
at least for me, that's helped me a lot too, to understand. So anybody that is in pain, if you're in pain, try different random movements of your foot, maybe to see if that changes anything. So you get a better idea of saying, okay, maybe something else might be related to it. Or I notice every time I go do this activity, like going to go pick up my laundry and twist my foot that way, that's when my knee pain comes on. And that can help you kind of decipher a little bit more of what might be the problem. So making sure you understand what's going on with your body in a very specific way is very helpful.
Yeah. So, Andre, appreciate you coming on. What books you reading right now or listening to?
Well, um, so I'm like, it's funny because I'm listening to a few different. I'm reading one right now. Maybe it's like a bit off topic. I can't remember the name right now, but it talks around like designing business models. So it's like a business modeling book. So I'm reading that for work. That's actually been really interesting, kind of learning around how like businesses kind of like you look at the different pieces that make up a business model, right? And like, think of like big companies, like even like some like Apple, like what does their business model look like and the different pieces of it. That's something I've been kind of reading recently. It's been really good and informative. I'm still listening through Becoming Supernatural, the recommendation by Tyler. Um, I feel like at first I was going through it really quickly because like the concepts were like I was easily kind of understanding them. And then now it's to the point where I was like, oh, this is some deep stuff. Like I think right now what I was just like hearing about was the pineal gland.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny because he mentioned it and like he was talking about it like in the book. And it just led me down like this rabbit hole, like learning more about the pineal gland. And that's where I ended up kind of really listening into like the Andrew Huberman podcast, right? So Huberman Lab. So like, because it's funny just how things like kind of naturally lead you down like this path. But yeah, it's just interesting how I'm learning little tidbits from that book, like slowly as I go through it, and then it naturally makes me want to research a bit more things. So listening to that as well. And there's one other book that I'm trying to think of that I've been reading because I remember I had like three books and they were like in different things. Oh man, what is the? Oh, it's another book for business, like for like my work. But it's I think it's called creating a data driven culture or a data driven organization. Pretty much the idea behind it is where things are going. Data is going to play a huge part for a lot of businesses, and even like as a PT, data is a big part, whether you recognize it or not, right? Like for example, when you talk to your patient and you're asking them questions, right? That's data, right? Getting information that way, or if you tell them to go through a little change, where like maybe twist to the left, twist to the right, and you can kind of observe if there's any kind of restriction in their movement, things like that. That's data. So it's really cool kind of seeing the role that data plays currently and like what it's going to continue to play in the future and just how technology can kind of help that and how important that collecting that data and having good data to make decisions and to drive things forward. So although it's like in the business context, it's just interesting seeing how we can use data in our day-to-day lives and how that like informs our processes and things like that. So those are the three books. Got a random mix, but it's just how I am. I'm taking things from everywhere, right? So
All right,
Yeah.
all right.
reading things, listening to stuff. Yeah. So
That's funny that you mentioned that. Data is huge. I've noticed that all of what I do is data. It was like, does this work? Does this not work?
yeah, yeah. That's all it is. You just have to kind of think of you have to have a hypothesis, like some idea or some thought, right? And then you kind of go through things, you learn a little bit here, you ask some questions, this, that, and the other, and you're essentially just trying to kind of prove or disprove your hypothesis, and then you iterate, right? You say, okay, what if I make this little change here and there? Does that change it? And then start the cycle all over again.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I've been trying to apply it to life and just how I approach things, like just being more aware of how I can kind of get information from different sources and like put it together to, create a model of the world and how I want to do things and how to, be successful at my work or in my workout routines or just in my personal life relationships, things like that. So always trying to learn, right? And
Yeah.
so I appreciate this time to like sit down with you all and just pick your brains. And obviously I have a lot of respect for both of you, and like even you putting this together and just like um it's natural how like I find myself a lot of times like I like resist things, like I fight things where I'm just like it's hard for me sometimes to step out and just want to talk and like be open, because I can sometimes just be naturally be to myself. But it's cool like once I start and I sit down and like obviously you guys bring great energy, and just like feeling welcomed and feeling good, having a good conversation just makes me feel like open up and just to be able to chat. So appreciate this space. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. But regardless,
Sure.
we gotta link up soon. So it's been real.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, Andre, appreciate you.
Have a good one. It's been a pleasure.